Okay, so first off, thank you so much for meeting with us. We really appreciate this.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So let's cut right to the chase. So why are you running for Congress?
Yeah, I get that question a lot. I think it's a pretty standard question for candidates, and especially for me being young, kind of unique circumstance. I've always cared about politics and policy. I got a graduate degree here in public policy, so I've always tried to stay informed and have views. But I've also been someone who never really gets worked up or frustrated over politics. It's a long, complicated process, and I think you have to make allowances for that. But this last year with Congress, in my opinion, repeatedly showing just how broken it was, really got me worked up and frustrated for the first time in my life. And I decided I should probably stop complaining and try to do something about it, and running is something that I can do.
So you talk about how you are young. You're only like 26,
Yeah,
right?
26.
So do you think that is going to impact the election and results in like your potential to be elected?
You know, some people, they hear that and they're like, oh, I could never vote for someone that young. But I get the opposite reaction sometimes too. They see these people who've been in Congress, some of them for decades, and they know that there's a need for new, fresh blood, fresh ideas. And so some people have said, I'll vote for you just based on your age alone. So you have a spectrum of responses, I think.
Okay. So could you talk a little bit about your background? We know you went to Cal Poly, but maybe like what you studied?
Yeah. I grew up here in San Luis, went to San Luis High, came to Cal Poly right out of high school, got a degree in math. And during those 4 years, got really involved in the community. I coached water polo and swimming at San Luis High. I got involved in tutoring and mentoring. So a lot of youth activities in the community, and got involved in their families and really enjoyed that. And decided to come back right afterwards and get a graduate degree in public policy, which I really enjoyed. That was just really eye-opening education for me. And then I decided after that to go to law school. So I'm currently in the middle of law school as well.
Where are you at law school?
I go to Georgetown Law and just finished my second year. So I'm now here campaigning full-time. And if I get elected, the law school is only 3 blocks from the Capitol, so I'd probably go to part-time and take a couple classes. And serve in Congress. And it's been done before. There have been members of the House and the Senate who have gone to law school simultaneously.
Wow, okay. So maybe just can you go like over, you stand for a lot of issues that are on your website, but can you maybe talk about exactly what they are?
I think the #1 issue that the next Congress needs to address is long-term deficits. Unfortunately, we see a lot of presidential candidates right now talking about cutting or eliminating very small portions of the budget, things like the Commerce Department, Education Department. Again, these are just really small portions of the budget that won't really do the job that needs to be done, unfortunately. Unfortunately, we have to talk about the big stuff. Those are all hard things to talk about, but that's where the money is, and if we're going to fix the problem, that's where it's going to get done. Those are defense, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and taxes. Again, they're all hard to talk about, but Congress is going to have to do something in those areas, and the sooner the better, because then we have more options.
Okay. So you talk about cutting down on military spending. Why do you think that that's an area that needs to be cut down?
The defense spending is the largest portion of the discretionary budget. It by far and away the largest portion. And luckily, I think there's a growing consensus in the military and outside that there are cuts that can be made without compromising national or global security. Things like base closing, things like troop reduction levels, things like moving towards smart power, things like we saw in Libya in terms of use of drones and special forces, also with the killing of Osama bin Laden. This is the way we need to be moving. We can better secure our national security, better secure the globe, and do it more effectively with less of a footprint. That's the direction we need to head. How
do you think people will react to plans like that?
Like I said, all 5 of these areas that I'm saying we need to talk about, they're all hard to talk about. They alienate people, they make people upset, but I'm committed to saying what needs to be said, in my opinion, no matter how hard, no matter how unpopular. Because in my opinion, we're headed to a crisis point. We're seeing this in countries like Greece. The United States doesn't have that much lower of a debt to GDP ratio compared to Greece, and we're headed straight that direction as well. Like I said, the sooner we make these decisions, the better we can make them, and we'll have more options. We have more options on the table now than we will in a decade.
Okay. So I know on your website also we noticed that you say the government spends too much energy on social issues. So what sort of social issues do you think they're spending too much time on?
You know, the big ones that come to people's mind are gay marriage and abortion. This last year, the last several months, we've seen contraception as well. Those are all important issues, and the government should be addressing those issues. You know, I have my views. I'm sure you have your views. Everyone does. I have no problem talking about those. I have no problem voting on those if elected and serving in the House. But I think we've seen over this last year, the contraception being the perfect example, that these things just grind Congress to a halt and divide Congress far too much. These other issues in terms of long-term spending and deficit reduction, reforming Social Security and Medicare, these are numeric problems. There's a quantitative target that we can try to hit, and that's prime real estate for making compromises and for negotiating, for sitting down and working out a plan that'll work. You just can't do that in the same way with a lot of these social issues. So I think we should stop dividing Congress over these issues and try to address some issues that Congress really could get some work done on.
All right. So could you talk about your, you had sort of an energy plan laid out. Could you talk a bit about that?
You know, again, energy, unfortunately, is an area that I think really divides people. I don't think it needs to be that way. I think there is room for compromise, for negotiation that's going to move this country forward. And my basic idea is that we're not at an all or nothing place. We're not at all oil, keep drilling, you know, drill more, drill everywhere. And we're not at an all renewable energy place. We're not there yet. It's just the physical reality, the practical reality. We would like to get there, and that's the kind of policies that Congress should be looking towards, is moving us forward and meeting our current needs. So I do think we are going to need to see more limited drilling here in the United States, but I also think the federal government should be investing in energy development and research so that we can be moving towards where we want to be and where we need to be. You know, oil is an issue that everyone across the political spectrum should get behind. It affects the environment, it affects national security, it affects the economy. Those are issues that people from all over care about. So we should be able to come up with something that works, that addresses the economy, that addresses the environment, that addresses national security.
All right. So going back to kind of you going to Cal Poly, so you obviously probably can understand where we're coming from when we're, you know, students are having a really hard time with all of these tuition hikes. What do you think you can bring to Congress to help students in the California education system to stop all of these budget cuts that we're experiencing?
Yeah, you know, unfortunately, it is the California education system. So the state is primarily responsible for it. But obviously the federal government is very involved in a lot of different facets. In the news the last few weeks, we've seen things about interest rates on student loans potentially doubling in the next couple of months. So that is one issue. I don't think that the interest rate should double on student loans. I still have student loans, and so that's something I definitely care about personally. But also there's another factor, and that's the escalating price of education. It just grows and grows and grows faster than inflation. And I really do think that's something the federal government can step in and become involved in. And there's a lot of different possibilities, but one possibility is telling institutions, educational institutions, that, you know, you're not going to be eligible for financial aid anymore if you grow your prices too quickly, if it's above a certain educational inflation benchmark. And that'll really give an incentive, I think, to educational institutions to rein in their costs and make sure they're not just taking advantage of all this financial aid that's available out there.
So is that something you would definitely be trying to push?
Yeah, I think that we need to be investing in our future, and if students aren't able to go to college because of the costs escalating too much or are afraid that they're not going to be able to pay off their loans, that's a huge detriment to our future as a country, and that's something that Congress needs to be looking at and addressing.
So then going off that too, what did you think about the recently passed student success fee? Are you familiar with it?
Was that the one here on campus?
Yeah.
You know, there's kind of a joke among graduates. The graduates like those fee hikes because it makes the university more attractive, makes their degree that they've already earned more attractive. But you know, that's just a joke. It is a concern. That is, you know, that's one of the factors that go into the cost of education. I don't know all the specifics. I did know that it was being voted on and that it passed, but I don't know all the specifics. When those things came up when I was in school, I generally voted against them because, you know, I was paying for my education, and that was a big concern of mine.
So what overall, like other than, of course, people, doubling potential interest rates on stuff, what overall do you think is wrong with our education system right now? And do you have any specific ideas other than, well, you've mentioned a few, but what should be done about it?
Yeah. Well, two things. Again, returning to kind of financial aid, I mentioned the possibility of the federal government saying, educational institutions, you need to rein in your costs if you want to be eligible for financial aid. I think there needs to be clear disclosure as well to students what financial aid is going to look like, how much it's going to cost them per year after graduation. I remember when I first applied, I had no idea what it was going to look like exactly. So if we can make that process as transparent as possible to help people make the best decisions possible for themselves, I think that's a very good thing. In terms of education in general, unfortunately in this country right now, it seems like we have a one-track system. You graduate from high school, and it's almost expected that you're going to go to a four-year institution, get a degree there, and then go get a job, maybe get a master's, then go get a job. That's not available for everyone, and that doesn't work for everyone. I think we need to look at other programs like technical institutions, even for the 11th and 12th grade in high school, so that kids who probably aren't going to be able to go to college will have a career and a skill set that they can market and use out there. We're starting to see manufacturing jobs and green jobs returning to the United States, and if people could be trained to do that at 18 or 20 and have a career lined up, that's a great thing. And the federal government and state government should definitely be investing in programs like that.
So what sort of experience, just kind of going back to the beginning, what sort of experience do you have to bring with you if you're elected to Congress?
Well, I'm a numbers guy. Like I said, my undergraduate degree is in math. And like I was mentioning earlier, a lot of these problems are quantitative problems. And it takes economists, it takes math people, it takes numbers people to address these and to really see the long-term picture of where we're at. Medicare is going to be completely exhausted in 2024, and the Social Security Trust Fund is going to be completely exhausted in 2033. Just yesterday I was looking at the actuarial reports that just came out a few weeks on those. We need members of Congress who understand that and how to address that. So I think we need more numbers people in Congress, and that's something I can bring. Another thing that I can bring is my youth. I do think that's an asset. Some of the changes are going to have to be made, for example, to Social Security. Sacrifices are going to be made, are going to have to be made. Sacrifices are going to be asked of your generation and my generation. And having someone at that table who represents that generation adds legitimacy to that process, I think.
All right. So since you grew up on the Central Coast, you were born and raised here, do you have any serious local connections that you think will help you?
Like I said, during college here at Cal Poly, I was really involved in the community. So my kind of volunteer base are a lot of those families, those kids, now they're in college, some of them are out of college, and their parents, their families are my main financial supporters and volunteers on the campaign. So yeah, they're the ones, hosting events and helping me out along the way. And I do think that's been a big asset. I wouldn't have been able to get this far without them. I probably wouldn't have run without that connection, those connections.
Just on a random note, did you ever do anything for ASI while you were at Cal Poly?
I did not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just seemed sort of relevant.
Yeah.
So why are you not affiliated with any political party?
That's a good question. I'm glad you asked, because, the absentee ballots just went out in the mail about a week ago, and people are realizing all of a sudden that the voting system we have now is different. This is the first time we've used our new primary system in California. And at first, we couldn't get the media to pay any attention to that. No one was wanting to write any articles on it. People didn't want to listen. But now that the ballot's actually in front of them, they're starting to ask some questions. And so I think it's important that people understand those changes, because they really are significant. The main differences are it's an open primary, meaning everyone gets the same ballot and can vote for whoever they like. And the second change, and this is pretty unique, as far as I know, I think only one other state has this system. The two top vote getters go on to the general election in November, regardless of the party. So you might see 2 Republicans, or you might see 2 Democrats in November, and that's it. You won't see anyone else. On top of that, we had redistricting here in California, independent redistricting for the first time, which I think is really important. I've actually been advocating that since I was in high school. And this new district we have here on the Central Coast, it's all of San Luis County, all of Santa Barbara County, and a little bit of Ventura County, not many people down there, is one of the most competitive districts in the country. Neither of the 2 major parties has over 40% of the voters registered, And there's about 30% of the voters who are independent with no party affiliation. So I really think someone with no party is best situated to represent the Central Coast, especially when you consider how frustrated people are with both parties, I think. People are looking for a third option who is willing to bring solutions to the table in Congress. So I think between this new primary system, being open and being able to choose anyone, the competitive district, and the current political climate, someone with no party is best situated to represent the Central Coast and to bring solutions at a federal level in Congress.
All right. So then, what is your stance on our current healthcare system, and do you have any plans of trying to change?
Yeah. You know, obviously the healthcare bill has been a big issue over the last few years. And in my view, it really addressed a lot of access issues in terms of getting people into the healthcare system, whether they had pre-existing conditions or for financial reasons couldn't access the system. And those are all important things. What it didn't do enough to do, and what the next Congress needs to address, is the cost of healthcare. The cost of healthcare is going to be the largest driver of federal debt over the next several decades in terms of Medicare and Medicaid largely, and some other programs. Congress must rein in that debt. It has to be done. Otherwise, we're going to be in a situation like Greece or worse. Unfunded obligations to Medicare alone over the next several decades is $30 trillion, which dwarfs current debt levels. So a couple of things. We need to continue moving away from fee-for-service. It just sends perverse incentives to consumers of healthcare and to providers of healthcare. We need to make sure that the most efficient and effective healthcare is being administered first. And the other thing is the federal government needs to start incentivizing healthy lifestyles. In many ways, and for example, agricultural policy, it incentivizes unhealthy lifestyles, and that needs to change. It needs to do that through agricultural policy, through education policy, through urban development policy, making sure that people have incentives to live healthy lifestyles, because that drives down healthcare costs for everyone.
So do you mean then like trying to make incentives for people to have regular doctor visits in agriculture, like maybe organic farming, green farming?
Exactly. A perfect example is California is one of the largest agricultural producers in the country, but it gets a very, very small, disproportionate portion of federal agricultural subsidies because what we grow here is generally fruits and vegetables, healthy things. That's just not where the subsidies go right now, unfortunately.
Okay. So then I guess wrapping it all up, really, like, of course, the whole idea of this story that we're doing is trying to get people to know their candidates for Congress. So is there anything that you would want to tell people just to sort of, wrap it all up, tell them about yourself?
Yeah, recapping some of the things I mentioned, being here on campus, young people voting is hugely important. Policies that are enacted now are going to affect them for decades. They have the most at stake, really, and having a young candidate, a young representative at the table in Congress is beneficial to them, having their interest in mind. We're encouraging young people to get involved. Like I mentioned, we have a lot of young people who have gotten involved. And again, these are decisions that are going to affect our generation for decades down the line, whether Medicare and Social Security and other programs like that are going to be available for us when we retire. That's not a for sure thing right now. We need a Congress that really is going to address that. And that's why I'm running. I want to make sure that happens.
So you really want to bring voice to the younger generation?
Absolutely.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.